The obsession of sugar daddy ends in a murder plot. Miami, Florida, March 14th, 2023. It was a hot and sunny morning in Miami, March 14th, 2023. The sun shone brightly over the bustling streets and crowded beaches, as is typical in this vibrant city. For most residents and tourists, it was just another ordinary day filled with activities and fun under the tropical heat. However, for Claire Thompson, this day was about to change irreversibly. Claire, a 25-year-old woman, was known for her stunning beauty and irresistible charm. With her blonde hair and a smile that lit up any room, she seemed to be living the dream life. Working as a marketing assistant at a local company and attending social events, Claire was in search of stability and happiness. However, her life was about to become entangled in a sinister plot. Claire was involved with Robert "Bob" Chandler, a 55-year-old businessman who had a well-known reputation in Miami. Bob was a typical sugar daddy, offering generous amounts of money and luxurious gifts to younger women in exchange for their company. At first, Claire saw this as an opportunity for a more comfortable and privileged life. However, the relationship began to change when Bob displayed increasing levels of possessiveness and obsession. For months, Claire enjoyed the benefits Bob provided, but she began to feel trapped and uncomfortable. Bob, in turn, became increasingly possessive and monitored her movements with unsettling zeal. He was interested in every detail of Claire's life, keeping track of her social media and her dates. This behavior began to instill growing fear in Claire, who tried to keep her distance but was aware that Bob was not someone easily dismissed. The tension between the two grew as Claire tried to reduce contact with Bob. She started dating other men and sought greater independence, which only intensified Bob's obsession. He could not accept the idea of losing Claire and began planning ways to force her to stay in his life, regardless of her will. Initially, Claire tried to handle the situation politely, but it quickly spiraled out of control. Bob was determined to keep Claire at any cost, and his obsession reached alarming proportions. Claire, now frightened, began to consider the possibility that Bob might go too far in his quest for control and power. Claire's friends began to notice a change in her behavior but were unaware of the true reason for her discomfort. Claire increasingly isolated herself, avoiding going out and trying to hide the growing fear she felt. Meanwhile, Bob was far from giving up. His plan was not only to ensure that Claire stayed with him, but also to prevent her from ever having another chance at happiness with someone else. Bob's obsession culminated in mounting desperation. He began meeting with low-reputation individuals, offering large sums of money in exchange for help ensuring that Claire would never leave him. These secret meetings and dark planning marked the beginning of a murder plot that would unfold in a tragic and violent manner. For most Miami residents, March 14th, 2023, seemed like an ordinary day, but for Claire Thompson, it was about to become the start of a nightmare. Her sugar daddy's obsession was about to lead to a series of events that would forever alter the course of her life and shock the entire community. On the morning of March 21st, 2023, Miami continued to bask in the summer heat. However, for Robert "Bob" Chandler, this warmth mirrored a growing internal fury. The dark plan he had been concocting had taken shape over the past few weeks and was now poised to be set in motion. Bob could not accept that Claire Thompson had distanced herself from him. What began as simple jealousy had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. His secret meetings with low-life individuals had become more frequent, and he started negotiating with criminals to ensure that Claire would be removed from his life once and for all. Bob's accomplices were individuals with criminal backgrounds, willing to accept easy money in exchange for brutal services. Bob met with them in a cheap hotel on the outskirts of Miami, a place where their discussions would go unheard. He took meticulous care to ensure that the conspiracy remained as discreet as possible. During these meetings, Bob provided precise details about Claire, her daily routine, her favorite places, and the times she usually went out. He explained that Claire had started seeing other men and that his control over her was slipping. Bob wanted to ensure that the intervention was final, so Claire would never have the chance to deviate from his plans. The criminals were instructed to closely follow Claire, identify her patterns, and find the perfect opportunity to act. Bob paid a portion of the money up front, promising the remainder once the job was done. His mind was set on a detailed plan, which included choosing the location and timing of the crime. He decided that Claire should be targeted at a place she frequented regularly to ensure no witnesses could identify the perpetrators. Bob's strategy was to make it look like a personal vendetta or a random crime, avoiding any direct connection to him. He feared that any mistake could lead to his exposure, so he was determined to stay away from the crime scene at the moment of the act. Bob planned to provide a series of detailed instructions on how the approach should be carried out and how to dispose of any evidence that could link his accomplices to the murder. Meanwhile, Claire continued her life, oblivious to the imminent danger. She frequented her usual cafe and maintained her daily commitments, unaware of the deadly plot being prepared against her. Her confidence rested in a comfortable and familiar routine while Bob and his accomplices prepared to execute the plan with meticulous precision. The atmosphere of tension and anticipation grew with each passing day. Bob grew increasingly impatient, eager to see the outcome of his plan. His meetings with the criminals were filled with discussions about final details and assurances that everything would go as expected. The plan was ready to be executed, and time was running out. Bob had everything organized, from the location of the crime to the way his accomplices should act. The day of the murder was approaching, and the shadow of an impending tragedy began to loom over Claire's life, with no hint of what was coming. Bob's determination to keep Claire by his side at any cost had led to an inevitable tragedy. His obsession had transformed into a cruel and calculated reality, with every move carefully planned to ensure his desire was fulfilled, regardless of the consequences. April 2nd, 2023, dawned with an unusually heavy overcast in Miami. The clouds rolled in, casting a gray pall over the city that contrasted sharply with the vibrant colors of the previous days. For most residents, it was just another Sunday, filled with leisurely activities and relaxation. For Claire Thompson, however, this day would mark a chilling turning point. Claire had spent the morning in her usual routine. She visited her favorite cafe, Café de Luna, a cozy spot she frequented every Sunday for brunch. The cafe was a place of solace for Claire, a small sanctuary where she could enjoy her coffee and pastries while catching up on her reading. Little did she know, this seemingly ordinary day would become anything but peaceful. Unbeknownst to Claire, Bob Chandler's plan was set into motion. His accomplices were already in place, having staked out the cafe and mapped out the area. They had been surveilling Claire for weeks, noting her habits and routines with unsettling precision. The plan was simple yet brutal. They would follow her from the cafe, isolate her, and execute the crime. Bob's hired men were equipped with disguises and tools to avoid detection. They had studied Claire's schedule and knew that she would be at the cafe around 11 a.m. on Sundays. As Claire enjoyed her meal, Bob's men positioned themselves strategically around the cafe, blending in with the crowd. Their eyes were trained on her every move, waiting for the right moment to act. Claire, oblivious to the danger, lingered over her coffee and newspaper. She chatted briefly with the barista and exchanged pleasantries with a few regulars. The cafe, usually a bustling hub of activity, seemed particularly subdued that morning, as if mirroring the foreboding atmosphere outside. Around noon, as Claire finished her meal and prepared to leave, Bob's men followed her at a discreet distance. They observed her walk down the street, heading towards a nearby park where she often took her afternoon walks. The park was a quiet place, perfect for the execution of their grim task. The park, surrounded by tall trees and secluded benches, offered plenty of cover. As Claire strolled through the pathways, enjoying the crisp air, the men closed in. They waited until she reached a particularly isolated section of the park, away from the view of other parkgoers. At that moment, Bob's men made their move. They approached Claire from different directions, surrounding her quickly and silently. Before Claire could react, they grabbed her and subdued her with chilling efficiency. Claire's attempts to scream were muffled. Her struggles were futile against their overpowering grip. The scene was disturbingly calm despite the violence of the act. The park, usually a place of serenity, became a backdrop for a horrifying crime. Within minutes, the murder was completed. Bob's men left the scene with cold precision, leaving behind only a stunned and lifeless Claire. As the day progressed, The storm clouds finally broke, unleashing a heavy rain that seemed to wash away the remnants of the crime. The park was soon deserted, the only traces of the tragedy hidden beneath the newly fallen rain. The police were alerted when a passerby discovered Claire's body later that afternoon. The initial investigation revealed little, with no immediate suspects and scant evidence to work with. The murder appeared to be a random act of violence, leaving the authorities puzzled and the community in shock. Back in his secure hideout, Bob Chandler watched the news with a sense of grim satisfaction. The plan had gone off without a hitch, but the satisfaction was fleeting. The reality of his actions began to sink in. He had succeeded in removing Claire from his life, but the cost was a dark stain on his soul, one that would never be washed away. As the investigation began to unfold, the residents of Miami were left to grapple with the implications of the crime. The seemingly ordinary day had ended in a nightmare, forever altering the lives of those who had known Claire and casting a shadow over the city. The evening of April 4th, 2023, began like any other in Miami. The city was alive with the usual nightlife, and the streets buzzed with activity. However, this night would become infamous for the horrific events that unfolded, forever altering the lives of those involved. Claire Thompson had planned a simple evening out. She was meeting a friend for dinner at a popular bistro in downtown Miami. The place was bustling with patrons, enjoying their meals and conversations under the warm, inviting lights. Unbeknownst to Claire, this night was set to become a nightmare. Bob Chandler's accomplices had been following Claire for days, meticulously observing her routine and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came as Claire exited the bistro, unaware of the danger that lurked nearby. The plan was to ambush her in the dimly lit parking lot behind the restaurant, where there were fewer people and less chance of interference. As Claire walked towards her car, two of Bob's accomplices, masked and dressed in dark clothing, closed in on her. They moved swiftly, their actions coordinated and precise. Claire's heart raced as she noticed their approach. She tried to scream, but one of the attackers quickly silenced her with a hand over her mouth while the other held a knife. The struggle was brief but brutal. Claire fought back with all her strength, but the attackers overpowered her. Within minutes, her life was brutally cut short in the parking lot. The assailants quickly fled the scene, leaving behind a scene of chaos and horror. The police were alerted soon after, when a passerby discovered Claire's body and called 911. The emergency response was swift, and officers arrived on the scene within minutes. The area was cordoned off, and a full investigation began. The sight of Claire's lifeless body shocked the community and left many questions unanswered. Detectives working the case immediately began to piece together the events leading up to the murder. Surveillance footage from the bistro and surrounding areas was reviewed, revealing the masked figures approaching Claire. The footage was crucial in identifying the attackers, but their faces were obscured by masks, leaving investigators with few leads. The breakthrough came when one of Bob's accomplices, feeling the weight of the crime, began to crack under pressure. Desperate and fearing for his own safety, he contacted the police, providing details about Bob's involvement and the plan they had executed. This crucial tip-off led the authorities to Bob's doorstep. Bob Chandler was apprehended at his home in the early hours of April 5, 2023. The arrest was swift and without incident, as Bob appeared to be resigned to his fate. Evidence found during the search of his residence, including detailed notes and communication records, confirmed his role in orchestrating the murder. The capture of Bob Chandler sent shockwaves through the community. His arrest was widely covered in the media, and the details of the crime were revealed to the public. The authorities praised the swift and effective response of the police and the cooperation of the accomplice who provided the crucial information. The aftermath of the murder left a scar on Miami. Claire Thompson's death was a tragic reminder of the consequences of unchecked obsession and the lengths to which some individuals would go to exert control. As the investigation concluded and Bob Chandler faced justice, the city grappled with the impact of the horrific events and the loss of a young life cut short. The case served as a chilling reminder of the dark side of human nature and the devastating effects of obsessive behavior. The capture of Bob Chandler brought some measure of closure to the community, but the memory of Claire Thompson's tragic end would linger as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the consequences of unbridled obsession.